Today is day 20 and possible the final day of testimony in the trial of Lindsay Clancy, the Massachusetts mother who admitted to killing her 3 young children in January 2023. Clancy's lawyer argues that she did it while suffering a psychotic episode. Prosecutors say she is criminally responsible for murdering her children. The defense called for a mistrial after a prosecution witness made comments about Clancy's Catholic faith. The judge denied that request. Watch.
I believe it was intentional misconduct, and I feel that the court should grant a motion for mistrial.
The question I asked the witness did not ask for any testimony about religion, about Catholicism, about mortal sins, or anything like that.
I'm not going to declare a mistrial this time. What I am going to do is I'm going to bring the jury in. I'm going to tell them to disregard it.
The prosecution has one last rebuttal witness to get through before closing arguments. Those are expected tomorrow. Meanwhile, a veteran child abuse prosecutor says Clancy should be held accountable no matter what the circumstances revealed. Watch.
Nobody who murders children is a victim, no matter what they're suffering through. You're never a victim if you murder people, because victims don't do something. Something happens to them. If you murder your children, you need to be held accountable and responsible for that, no matter what the whys are, no matter what the reasons are.
Haley, a sentiment shared by many of the country who have been watching this tragedy unfold.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting that the defense asked for a mistrial yesterday, because there was a similar comment made in last week's proceedings where there actually could have been a mistrial had the defense decided to pursue that, but they decided not to at the time. And my understanding is the only reason that the defense would be asking for that now is because the 2 witnesses who testified yesterday were so damning for Lindsay Clancy's case. There were 2 doctors, both of whom examined Lindsay Clancy after the killings. And essentially, they completely threw water on this claim that she was suffering an episode of psychosis at the time of the killings. And that's what the entire defense rests on, is this belief that for the first time in her life, she suffered a temporary moment of psychosis that lasted about 18 minutes, apparently didn't affect her ability to have a conversation with her husband in the middle of it when they were on the phone together, and then has never manifested itself since. And both of the doctors who testified said, no, we do not believe that was impossible. And they gave their explanations of what they had diagnosed her with instead. And so at this point, it seems like the defense's best argument and its best case is that this case has become something completely different than the murder trial that it actually is. And their best hope is that it has taken on a life of its own in terms of a sort of national conversation about postpartum care and about mental health and how we treat that. And I think that it is a catastrophic mistake for women in particular to make this the foundation of that very important debate, because there is nothing about Lindsay Clancy that is relatable at all. First of all, she had access to far more privilege than the vast majority of mothers. She had access to a nanny. Her older 2 were in daycare. Her husband was working from home at the time of the killings in this period of time in her life. Second of all, the implication here that because women might struggle with postpartum depression or with the lack of appropriate postpartum care somehow makes us relatable to someone who killed her 3 children, I would like everyone to think about the implication of that argument, because the suggestion here is that because women are so hormonally volatile in the early months after childbirth, that we all cannot be trusted to control our decisions and our behavior. That's a very dangerous implication, and I do not accept that.
Jeremy, you're an attorney, and you know that the juror box, you know, they're charged with only evaluating the 4 corners of that universe. So there's been quite a robust national conversation, occurred many of the touch points that Kaylee just mentioned, but all the jurors have to determine is whether indeed that psychosis existed and whether it absolves her of the appreciation of knowing the nature of her actions. And my question to you is, as what always sort of happens in these very public trials, the full story, or I should say the soundbite story, is far more general and simple than what's been revealed at trial, where there has been a lot of damning evidence about the clarity of her mind at that time.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you look like the juries, or the jury in particular, it is impossible to protect them from all of the national conversation that's been going on. I mean, as much as you try to sequester and keep them, you know, immune from those conversations so you don't affect their judgment, it's inevitable that some of that is going to leak through. And what's interesting to me is that if you notice, it kind of started with this case in particular, you know, this whole national conversation began And it started with very kind of normal people having discussions, kind of talking about it. They're giving their take. And, as Kaylee mentioned, people had conversations about their health after, giving birth and postpartum depression, that kind of thing. But then you have this other group of people, like the kind of crazy activist class that gets a hold of it. And now they're showing up and wearing all their pink shirts, showing up at the courthouse. They're, I am Lindsay Clancy, all this nonsense. They're making her a hero. And regardless of your opinion on the case, there's no one here that sees Lindsay Clancy as a hero in this story. And it's gotten just totally out of control. They're stalking the husband, and here's a picture of him and his new wife. Like, leave the guy alone. I mean, it has gotten so out of control, and it's like you always have like kind of a normal, normal everyday Americans talk about things, but then you just get to the activist class and things just start to blow up.
Great point.
Kaylee, I know you mentioned that she has privilege and that she has a nanny and all the other support system. That certainly does help. But I want to be clear and make sure that we understand that just because someone has privilege, which affords you a lot, trust me. But I think in a case when you're dealing with postpartum, experiencing those severe conditions and symptoms, then it's not the same. So we can't say because she had access to those, again, things that would make your life easier, post-pregnancy easy, doesn't mean that she's not having the mental issues. So we'll say that, number one. And number two, as far as making this a cause, to your point, I don't know that these women, and I can't speak for the women, but I would like to think that they're not trying to make a mockery of this situation, and that just making sure that we understand that women do have those severe symptoms and it is real. I also want to make sure, because I know the gentleman said that anyone who murders a child should be held accountable and there's no excuse. I want to make sure that we don't conflate that there are evil people out there who intentionally and knowingly abuse and kill children, and that is completely heinous and unacceptable. But again, not to conflate the two. So again, how this trial is going to end, we have no idea. And I hope, if anything, instead of all the craziness that we've talked about that this has promoted online and in social media world, I hope that it can bring about some real honest discussions that are meaningful and helpful to people who are experiencing mental issues.
Well, I don't know. I do agree with Kaylee. I think that if you make this situation out to be the standard for what happens if you have postpartum depression, I can't imagine anything out there that would more stigmatize women from getting help if they genuinely have that. And I don't know about the particulars of this woman, what she was going through, but one of the things about society is that we reward people who do good and we punish those who do evil. And no matter what the situation was here, these children are dead. The husband lost his 3 children, and these are the victims in this scenario. And I have been pretty disgusted watching some people try to flip that somehow. And we as people, as citizens, need to also have responsibility for understanding that society cannot operate if people are not punished for wrongdoing. And if we have this problem society-wide, I mean, we see people who are benefiting from fraud and grifting and committing crime, and this is a complete breakdown of civilization.
Agreed. All right, guys, we'll stay on it, of course.